Good afternoon. This meeting of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will now come to order. Today is Thursday, December 15th, and the time is 1:11 p.m. I mean a.m. and p.m. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll begin with roll call. Vice Chair Freeman.
Here.
Vice Chair Herrera. Commissioner McNulty.
Here.
Commissioner Sturts.
Here.
We have a quorum, and we do expect Vice Chair Herrera to be joining us shortly. Other folks at the table include our legal counsel, Mary O'Grady and Joe Canefield, our mapping consultant today, Willie Desmond. We have our staff, Chief Technology Officer Buck Forst, our Executive Director Ray Bladine, glad you're back, Ray, and Christina Gomez, our Deputy Executive Director, our Public Information Officer Stu Robinson, and our court reporter Marty Herder is taking an accurate transcript of today's proceedings. So, since our meeting Monday, the next two items on the agenda have been the same for the last few meetings at least. We'll go to item 2, discussion, direction of mapping consultant, and possible action regarding adjustments to draft congressional districts and possible action regarding adoption and certification of final congressional districts. So it looks like Mr. Desmond was very busy over the last couple days. We have a stack in front of us of different change reports for both the congressional and working map, legislative working maps. So we'll start with congressional, and I'll let Mr. Desmond decide what he'd like to cover first.
Okay. If you give us just 1 second, we're trying to make sure that we're able to broadcast on the TriCaster. It should be loading right now. And okay, we're good to go. All right, so there are, I believe, 10 different change reports for you to look at today. The first one you have for the legislative and congressional are both just showing you the draft map compared to the current working map, so that you can kind of see the progress we've made as we've come along. Continuing on with the congressional, we have change maps for a map that Commissioner Sturts had put together. Also, he asked that I make a full packet of like the splits reports and the components reports, so that's been included as well. There's a change report for Commissioner McNulty's second draft of her congressional map. Basically what I did there was just take the changes she had looked at last week, but overlaid them onto the new working map so that they fit within the context of what's already been done. And after that we go to legislative. So if you guys want to start with congressional, we can go through the working map again, or else you can just reference this document if you have any questions of what has been done to affect all the different districts.
Let's go through the working map just to refresh everyone, get us on the same page.
Okay. And I believe these are either on the website or going to be up in a little while. If there's anyone in the room who would like a copy, I think I have them on a thumb drive that we can pass around. Okay, so the draft plan is the red line here. The darker brownish black line behind it is the working map. The only changes that have been accepted for analysis so far are some that the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government has asked for. Those happened in Districts 3 and District 7, our 2 voting rights districts. In Districts 3, a slightly larger portion of Tucson was added to the district, and to compensate some of the unincorporated area between Tucson and Morena was taken out of the district. This now runs up Alvaron over on Aviation. It used to run, I guess, down Interstate 10 and then up at Campbell. That's the change there. Over here, there's not really streets, but this runs along now. It's just unincorporated area with some population to balance. In District 7, there's been some population swap with Districts 6 and 9. The district goes a little farther here, out to Priest, over on Van Buren, over on McDowell, and then over on Thomas. I can tell you specifically what north-south roads these are here, but I believe this is like 47th, and this one is, I don't recall, but I'll change this to okay. The other changes then have been it grabs a little more population here instead of coming over to 7th Avenue at Indian School. It comes up north of Camelback. It goes up Central Avenue a little bit further. As a result of adding this population, some has been removed. It's gone to both districts 6 and 9. The district used to run along Northern Avenue until it hit 7th Avenue. Now it goes up to Glendale Avenue, takes that over to 43rd, and then meets up with Northern. And those have been the only changes that have been made so far in the congressional draft map, to the congressional draft map. Are there any questions about that?
Any questions? Commissioner McNulty?
Those changes were all Voting Rights Act changes, is that correct? Mr.
Correct.
Desmond, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Just check with strategic telemetry, and where are we, or with legal counsel, where are we with the review of the majority-minority districts? What's the status of the analysis?
We've been working with Dr. King and his graduate students. We have gotten some information back, but at this point we're not ready to present anything. We're still kind of going back and forth trying to figure out some last minute things, I guess.
Are there any, Madam Chair, are there any red flags that are being sent up in your discussions, or is the opinion right now that these 2 districts are going or are designed in the right direction, and we feel fairly confident in their work?
Not right now with the congressional maps, no.
I'm sorry?
Not with the congressional maps, no red flags.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Herrera?
What are we reviewing right now?
Sorry, we're just looking at the congressional working map as it stands today, and then Mr. Desmond was going to walk us through the different change reports that he prepared.
Thank you.
I think we're ready to do that now.
Okay. Well, the first of the congressional changes to look at today, there's one by Commissioner McNulty and one by Commissioner Sturts. It's up to you guys where you start, but I'll leave it to. If it's all right, we'll start with Commissioner Sturts then.
Sure. If that's what you want to do, okay.
Madam Chair, at our, a week and a half ago, I presented a map that had what was considered to be, by some of the commissioners, substantive changes. And there was a desire to, and there was a lot of feedback and conversation about how substantive some of those changes are. We also, this past Monday, at our hearing, determined that we were going to fix the boundaries of 2 of the legislative districts, Districts 3 and 7, fix them in a temporary sense so that they could move forward upstream for analysis. The map that I had prepared affected, the map that I had prepared and presented a week and a half ago had affected Congressional District 3. So going down the path of trying to work under those parameters, I had to revisit. So what I have done, and I also heard a lot of testimony and reflecting back, and there's some issues that are areas that led to a higher level of discussion that there was a lot of passion about, specifically in regards to the city of Flagstaff and their placement into with the First Nations, and also into the effectively looking at what we'd call the CD9 district, or the district that's in the main Maricopa area. So what I chose to do for the purposes of today, at the request of some of the other commissioners, was to take a very simple walkthrough approach. And there's simply just 6 steps that took place. And if you want to, you can pass those down. These are very simple congressional map modifications, and I can walk you through each one of them and show you where effectively what I was trying to achieve. So again, because Santa Cruz County could not be bifurcated based on the fact that Congressional District 3 is now a placeholder district for the majority-minority district, and Congressional District 7 as well, there was a lot of commentary. In fact, there was a recommendation by Commissioner McNulty regarding keeping Cochise County whole. So I began first with keeping Cochise County whole, and simultaneously in one approach that was taken by Commissioner McNulty, she had added that to the urban Tucson area. We've heard a tremendous amount of testimony regarding, and I've brought this up multiple times before, regarding Oro Valley, Saddlebrook, Marana, and their relationship with the urban Tucson area. So the approach that I've taken was quite simple. I have, under the first item, which is moving the population of CD2 or CD1. It's actually it's going from 2 directions here. I'm adding the 123,715 people that are in this district from CD2 into CD1, making Cochise County whole and making that entire district, the Cochise County, part of the Eastern Rural District. I then, to an effort to, I did not, again, based on the placeholder district of the minority district of CD3, I did not make the change that I was recommending earlier that we heard testimony on, and that has been historically a connection between the greater Tucson urban area and Sierra Vista. I've eliminated that and gone and collected the 123,715 population from CD1, and which, if you can see by this green line here, this is, thank you for Willie for boosting it up, that line right there identifies where the current draft map line shows. So I'm capturing this southern part of Pinal County and Marana, Oro Valley, and the areas that had penetrated down into the Casas Adobes area, and as well as Saddlebrook, and include those into the greater metro area. So I've had a simple exchange from CD2 to CD1 of 123,715, and from CD1 to CD2 of 123,715. This keeps Cochise County whole. It keeps Marana, Oro Valley, Saddlebrook together with Tucson, and also enhances the Interstate 10 corridor, which comes through right through here. The third move that I've made is CD4 to CD6. This was a request that has come up at multiple meetings, which is the attempt to keep Fountain Hills with Scottsdale. So what I've done is I have taken that divot out and filled the divot in by taking it out of CD4 and adding it into CD6. That was a population exchange of 27,605. So this line now becomes the border of CD6. And we'll see when we get into the splits report, the competitiveness reports, that essentially these moves have become relatively lateral, meaning that there was not a large net effect. We've created compactness and solved other of the 6 criteria that we've been we've heard testimony on and wanted to make modifications without significantly bringing detriment to the other criteria. Now, if we want to move over, we have a small area that we needed in south. There's a population set off that needed to be moved from CD4 to CD5 of 6,610. That is a population set off from the southeast corner of CD5. There was a couple things that occurred. That was it's in that corner right there, which was a population set off just to balance the districts. If you look at the underlying, there is there are neighborhoods that were also connected as well. Willie, if we can move up to CD8 to CD4. On the west side of CD8, it was, and I think, Madam Chair, you would characterize this as the rural urban district, I think that at one time, where there's a large urban population, or large rural population on the west side. What I have done is to accumulate that area and add that to the rural district of CD4, extracting it out of CD8, making 8 more compact, making 8 more urban, and allowing that rural part of the west side of the current CD8 to be integrated into CD4. And then out of CD4, and that was a population exchange of 32,185. And then from CD4, what we've been trying to do is to try to accumulate and to keep Anthem, New River together, along with the extension of the I-17 corridor. So that line was the current line of the map, and now I've just scooted it over to be able to pick up New River and Anthem and include it into the extension of CD8. And now you look at on the splits report, we now have 1 less split county. In the competitiveness analysis, you'll see that it has been a series of, for all intents and purposes, lateral changes. CD1 actually becomes a slightly more Democrat. CD2 has a slight by 0.5% to Republican. CD3 was unchanged. It does show in one of the areas, both in CD3 and CD9, or excuse me, in CD3 and CD7, as well as CD9, that there might have been some population adjustments. I'm not sure whether or not that was just a pickup that when strategic telemetry was making the adjustments, they might have picked up a block one way or the other, but the intent was to not touch 3, 7, or 9, and to make modifications that we have heard from public comment. We've now completed fixing the Fountain Hills area. We've completed keeping Cochise County whole. We've completed the relationship between Saddlebrook, Oro Valley, Marana, being contiguous with the greater Tucson area. As you can see, there is no longer 2 border districts or even any small part of the district touching the border. 3's remained intact, 7's remained intact, 9's remained intact. There's been no bifurcation of the First Nations mapping as it occurred that I was looking at earlier in an attempt to get a higher level of competition between 4 and 1. We were able to, 1 is actually slightly more competitive on the, leaning a little bit more, it's almost a 50-50 district. 2 is almost a 50-50 district. 9 is almost a 50-50 district. And of course, 3 and 7 are majority minority districts. So any questions?
Thank you for that comprehensive presentation. That was very helpful. I noticed that we're losing the third border concept idea.
Well, Madam Chair, to keep Cochise County whole and to keep the Santa Cruz and that borderline whole, it becomes the only way to try to do it. And I actually tried to create this little sliver here, and it became, again, almost the same style that we had occurred before, which was an attempt to touch the border for touching the border's sake rather than for actually having an impact.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Sturts or comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
Mr. Desmond, could you focus in on the urban Maricopa County area, please? I mean, I'd like to look at the map. One thing, I mean, there are a number of things that jump out at me, but one thing that comes to me right now is a concern I have is with, I have many concerns with the proposed CD9, but one in particular is that there's a strong community of interest with Paradise Valley, the Biltmore area, the Arcadia area, the Camelback corridor, and sort of the Madison School District area of north central Phoenix. Paradise Valley is not densely populated. I believe it's only about 10,000 people. Just thinking out loud on possible refinements is I could see that going in. I'm not sure. I don't know if Commissioner Sturts, you know offhand the population of the New River Anthem area. I have a feeling it exceeds the PV area. But,
It does.
I believe it's about 36,000.
36, so too much. All right. Well, that's one thing I would like to look at is maybe an exchange there that would underpopulate 6. It would need to get population somewhere. I was thinking that maybe it could get it from 8, which would allow 8 to grab more Peoria. 9 would then have to shed a little population, and 5 would have to pick up, and I'd have to look at it to see if it made sense in terms of whether it introduced any new splits. That was just one thought.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Sturts, Commissioner Sturts, have you, the deviation from ideal population, I mean, there's some of, I think most of them are a little off with the exception of 3. Any ideas how you would address the deviation from population in the 8 out of the 9 districts?
Well, Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
The deviation of population is plus or minus single neighborhoods potentially. For example, on district number 2, it's a deviation of 41. In an adjacent district, it is a deviation of 39. So we know that we're going to be able to make subtle adjustments from one to the other. Because this was a map, and let me just share this with you. There is nothing about, this was a map that I created looking at this in an entirely different light. We've been arguing about competitiveness, we've been arguing about compactness, we've been arguing about certain things, but what I've heard come through is that 3 and 7 were fixed districts, and 9 was a really district that 3 of these commissioners are really fixed on. And if fixing the other parts of the map and fixing the other parts of the state mean compromising to be able to get those fixes, that's going to be a compromise that is going to have to take place. Or else we're just going to have a map that is going to not meet with the overall objectives that we have been continuing to hear across the state. So if it means that a district like 9, and I would continue to like to, as Commissioner Freeman had alluded to, look at some of the edges at 9, but in respect to Commissioners Herrera and McNulty, 9 was a district that they felt very passionate about. I chose to not touch the edges of that map in this analysis. There are aspects of it of this map that can be improved, and there are aspects of these small adjustments that we can make. But we are meeting through this map many of the objectives that we have heard through public testimony. We've created it is more compact in our urban areas. We now have 2 truly urban or rural districts, and we are meeting with the objective of urban Tucson being connected with its growth corridor up into Pinal County. So I am open for continued discussion on this. So hopefully that this is that I've presented this in such a way as that it's comprehensive enough to clearly understand, and that there's aspects of this map that are that could be moved forward.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I do appreciate this. I think this is, the steps you provided were easy to follow. I can understand where you took some population out of one and put it into another. So I do appreciate that. I also appreciate that you didn't mess with 3 and 7. I think those are things that I think we had all agreed on until we get the analysis back. So I appreciate the changes you made. I think you went in a different direction. That's something that I would, with further analysis, I definitely may consider. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none. So Mr. Freeman, on your question earlier, did you want to see some kind of change then explored by Mr. Desmond? Or?
Well, I don't know how productive it would be at this point of the game to go through it live, but it certainly, that was one thought that came to mind. Okay. To respect that community of interest, and it would require, I mean, there might be other ways to make adjustments. Again, thinking out loud, perhaps if 6 gets underpopulated but takes population from New River and Anthem, perhaps then this chunk of Mesa gets put back in it. That's a possibility, which would clean that up. I think that would be a good change. Perhaps more Peoria could be grabbed. I mean, there's going to be a series of adjustments there to make that happen, and it's something I could certainly look into.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
If it would please you, I would be more than happy to work with Commissioner Freeman in trying to adjust some of these areas so that we can get those changes over to Mr. Desmond in a like format for presentation.
If that's the direction that Mr. Freeman would like to go and explore, that's fine. Maybe, why don't we talk about, before we give directions to Mr. Desmond, the other congressional change reports that he's prepared, and we'll talk about those, and then maybe at the end talk about what we want to have him do next. So do we want to go to the next change report?
Okay.
You'll have to refresh my memory, at least, on some of the directions we gave you.
Mine too. It says my name on it, but I have no idea what it is.
This, so at the last meeting, you had asked that I go ahead and take any of the changes that were still kind of undecided out there and see how I could work them in with the new working map, so that, you know, we're not trying to go back to something that doesn't necessarily fit anymore. So for this map, what I did was I took the McNulty map that I believe was on the 5th, and laid it over the top of the working map and adjusted some population there. There were some small shifts that had, you know, affected this map from districts 3 and 7, and kind of applied it again, so that if it was something you wanted to explore again, we were able to look at that based off of what we have so far. So I'd be happy to go through some of the changes that happened from the draft map and kind of retrace our steps. The first one was, again, to keep Cochise County whole. In this case, Cochise County was incorporated into District Number 2. District 2 then had some population switches with District 3. We have to look and make sure those don't undo some of the changes from Hispanic Coalition government, but I believe that that's the case. I could be wrong. Going back out to the rest of the state, District Number 1 needs to pick up a little population. It does that in the Verde Valley. Instead of, it basically moves the village of Oak Creek into the rest with Sedona and Camp Verde and Lake Montezuma. As a result, District Number 4 is a little underpopulated. District Number 4 then picks up some population here, keeping District 8 going back to the county line. And also in the New River and Anthem area, it takes a little bit more population here. District 6 is then underpopulated, so it balances its population with District Number 8. Also, District 6, the Paradise Valley area, or Fountain Hills, excuse me, is put in with Scottsdale. So what this does is it incorporates Fountain Hills with Scottsdale. It keeps Cochise County whole, and it moves it moves Oak Creek into District 1 with the rest of the Verde Valley.
Madam Chair.
Ms. McNulty?
Mr. Desmond, are the districts now all balanced on that map?
I believe so, yes.
Population is all balanced.
The biggest deviation is negative 23 people in District 8. So it's not perfectly balanced. There would be a little tweaking at the end.
One thing I like about this map is that it reduces the huge size of CD1, which I think is, if I had to pick one comment that we heard more than anything else in the course of public comment, it was that CD1 was so huge it was unrepresentable. I think that Marana, Oro Valley, and Saddlebrook, we heard a lot of comments, at least from folks in Saddlebrook, and to a lesser extent Oro Valley, and to a much lesser extent Marana, about the relationship of those communities. And this map does keep them together in what is by and large a rural district. I think less than 30% of that district is urban, although there are three sort of centers of community, denser population. One would be that Pinal County area, one would be the sort of central part of the district, and the third would be Flagstaff. So I think each of those areas would have a strong voice in the district with the other rural communities. I think I'd like to use this opportunity to just talk about my perspective on community of interest. I know we don't have a definition that we've adopted as a commission, and I think one of the reasons for that is because we felt it would be difficult to arrive at a consensus definition, and I know we each have our own perspective on what communities of interest are. And so I'd like to expand on what mine is. I've talked about this a little earlier, but I'm going to say this again. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it and kind of wrote out the way I view it. I think it's a group of people residing in a specific locale who have common cultural or historic heritage which defines them and which transcends their political party affiliation, and who draw together to advocate on behalf of their community on issues that are within the purview of representatives elected from the districts whose boundaries are being drawn. So I see a community of interest as a fairly small group of people that come together to take civic action with regard to the kinds of issues that the representative of the district that we're considering would be concerned about. I see some folks here today in the audience from Guadalupe, or I would think of Guadalupe as a community of interest. I think of Saddlebrook as a community of interest. I don't think of Saddlebrook, Oro Valley, and Marana together as a community of interest, although we've worked extremely hard in drawing these maps to develop districts, that make sense from a community perspective. When I think of a community of interest and respecting it, my perspective is we don't take a town like Guadalupe and draw a line down the middle of that. I don't think a community of interest is a network. I don't think a community of interest should be used for the purpose of promoting any political party. And I don't think it's an exclusionary device. I don't think it's a reason to say we're different from those people and we don't want to be with them. I think congressional and legislative districts are compilations of different communities and different communities of interest. Our job isn't to ensure that any community of interest has a certain type of representation. I think it's our job to respect, to the extent practicable, the ability of communities of interest to draw together and have their voices heard as communities with other voices within their district. So, Madam Chair, I apologize for taking this time, but I know it's important that we do have these things in our record, and that's been my perspective as I've looked at pulling these districts together throughout the state about what a community of interest is. So having said that, we've heard a lot of comment, as I say, particularly from Saddlebrook, on the Marana, Oro Valley, Saddlebrook area, and a lot of conflicting comment. I was looking through my notes over the last couple days, and for example, on September 27th, 2011, Ms. St. Angelo, who's a political consultant who's attended many of our meetings, testified that Casa Grande was much more similar to their community, and that all the growth was north along the Tangerine Corridor and into Pima County and along the Picacho Peak Transportation Corridor. So I just raised that because there are very different ways of looking at all of these communities and how they work together. We've got 120,000 people in that part of the state, and I think it makes sense for Tucson at this point. By Tucson, I mean the southern Arizona metropolitan area, to have another congressional representative. So I don't find that as concerning as some do, and I do find I do like the idea of reducing the size of CD1, given all the comments that we heard about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or perspectives?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
The, the concept of representative government is really the crux of what we're talking about in these redistricting and creating these maps. And that's that not only were we giving the context of the requirements of the 6 criteria given to us by the people of the state of Arizona through their voting for Proposition 106, but also that with that, I believe that they were trying to craft it in such a way as that to give representatives that have got broad discretion in what and how they're representing the people in their districts in Washington, but there's some commonality in what those issues are. For example, in Congressional District 1, we've got everything from mining to there's 3 large reservoirs in the aquifers, I should say, in the southeast part of the state. We've got ranching, we've got forestry, we've got public enjoyment of public lands. We've got a large quantity of First Nations that have been combined together. So I see that there's a representative going to, and we've also got the Pinal County connection, which is a combination of rural that is emerging into urban. So Cochise County has got approximately 130,000 people living in it. We've reduced by the nature of this design, we've reduced the quantity of representation in Pinal County. We've maintained the representation up in the northeast in how I've described it. So I think that there could be a representative that could be elected from anywhere from Flagstaff to Pinal County to Cochise County to represent District 1. I think that a very good balance, and someone that has got a clear understanding of all of those issues would make great representative in Washington. Likewise, in the new CD4, the western side of what we've got in our draft maps as draft 8, those are rural areas that are now combined with the rest of the rural part of the ranching side. Everything from North Yuma County into La Paz and Mojave County. Those are there's transportation and history that are all wound nicely together. I'm still not comfortable in how 4 hooks around to pick up the east side of the growing metro Maricopa area, but that's something that, again, we've been going back and forth on this ad nauseum and trying to get to a place where we can get to a map that we can forward on to DOJ. And as Commissioner Herrera has put forward a number of times, this is all about looking at it and compromising. And that's the reason why I put the map together the way that I have today. There are aspects of it that I believe in all 4 corners meet with the objectives that we've been looking to do. Even though it's not the map that I put forward a week and a half ago, which I love. This is a map that marries a lot of those together into one, and I find that this is probably as close as I can get to, with a few tweaks on the edges and a few adjustments, as I'm sure will be suggested, can be as close as we can to being something that we could move forward. So the concept of communities of interest, Commissioner McNulty's right, we left that to our own personal discretion, and there has been commentary about that. But I think that when we look at representative government, it is how they can represent a group of that have something in a series of things that they have in common when they go back to Washington. And the 2 rural districts make a ton of sense for that reason. The urban districts make a lot of sense for that reason. And the areas of greatest level of expansion, which is the northwest side of Tucson and the connection up the I-10 corridor it makes all the sense in the world that somebody going back to Washington is going to have a clear and concise understanding of what those needs of his or her constituents are going to be.
Thank you. Other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
excuse me. With respect to communities of interest, I am not going to be able to speak with the eloquence Commissioner McNulty just did, but I have addressed that issue before. I think it's incumbent upon the Commission, whatever it does, to apply its standards evenly, fairly, and consistently across the state. We may not be able to do that in the voting rights districts because obviously federal law governs, it trumps what we're trying to do. But in the rest of the state, we need to be even and fair. And during my time on the Commission, I've heard various rationales for including various communities with other communities. Inconsistent rationales at times. I've heard 1,000 points of light, it doesn't matter as long as we don't split the small community, we can assemble them however we want. I've also heard, well, this community doesn't fit with the other district, so let's not put those communities there. I've also heard rationale supporting the large rural districts. I believe there is a rural community of interest that creates a very large district. I don't think I have concerns about both sets of maps we've looked at so far today, whether that community of interest has been respected. I think there's more than one way a community of interest can be disrespected. I think you obviously can disrespect it by splitting it, splitting the town or the city, or splitting the groups of communities with a line down the middle. I think you can also disrespect a community of interest by placing the community, although whole, with a completely different community that has conflicting interests. A community of interest is a group of people that can be defined by a contiguous geographic area that is looking to have a voice in the legislature. And obviously when you split the community by drawing a line down the middle of it, you inhibit that voice because you decrease the effectiveness of that voice because you've split the community, and now that community represents a much smaller segment of the districts or multiple districts in which it finds itself. But you can also take a community and place it, keeping it whole, and place it in with another part of the state that has radically different interests, and that overwhelms that community such that once again that community of interest, its voice is stifled in a way. And I think we hear a lot of that with the rural community of interest. There's the concern that I've heard that if you include, it doesn't take much of an urban area to include with a rural district before the urban interests predominate. It doesn't have to be 50% plus one. I think the concern is even if you've got 20, 15, maybe even 10% an urban population in a district, otherwise rural district, that urban voice speaks much more loudly, clearly. It's where people are concentrated, they're easy to reach, perhaps there's more money there, that perhaps that's where the candidate comes from, and the rural community their interests are not heard quite as clearly. So, and that's why there are certainly aspects of this particular map that I think are helpful. I still have concerns about, in particular, that rural community of interest. We've got, the parts of the Tucson suburbs included in a eastern rural district. You've also got that arm coming over from the west that's including, Santan Valley and Apache Junction and Florence even with that so-called river district. And then you've got District 8, which is a mixture of rural and some urban areas in western Maricopa County. I've got concerns that at least hitting on the rural versus urban interest, that rural community of interest is being disrespected. And I think there are ways. I think Commissioner Sturts tried out a map on Monday, which in many respects comported with ways that I was looking at addressing the congressional map, such that I didn't think it was necessary for me to roll out my map, even if there were differences. I think, I'm interested in what he's proposed today. This is the first time I've seen it. So, I think perhaps there are ways that it could be adjusted and fine-tuned and better meet, to better meet all 6 of the goals.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Desmond, could we look at what are the number of splits in Pinal County on these 2 maps?
So, the only real difference is that Moreno, Oro Valley, and Catalina go to District 2 in Commissioner Sturtz's map. That's the green line. There is a split of Eloy that happens there. But that's the only split.
The only new split?
The only new split in Pinal County, I believe. Actually, no, there is a small portion of Santan goes into District 5. That's the only new split.
So do we have the report of how many total splits there are in each county now? I know we're not including that in these summary reports, is that right?
That's not in the summary reports. What
Okay.
I could do is run the full set of reports.
Yeah,
for
that's
both.
okay. That's all right. I was just curious. The other thing I see about this, about the movement of Cochise County back into, the whole of Cochise County into CD1, is it degrades the competitiveness of Congressional District 2. Under Index 2, it says the difference is 1.8%. Republican leaning nature of the district is increased. Democratic leaning nature is decreased. Democratic performance is decreased. Looks like that's true under all of the indices. I would be concerned about that also.
Any other comments or questions?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
In regards to the, pardon me, the proposed degradation of competitiveness in Congressional District 2, it's a half of a percent swing to 0.6% of a swing in actually bringing it's very close to being a 50-50. Even in registration, there was a slight increase in the ability or in the competitiveness on the, it's 50.9% to 49.1% in Index 2, 50.9% to 49% in Index 3, 53.1% to 46.3 in Index 4, so on and so forth. So it's very, very close, very, 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 very close to what it was previously. On a like interest in District 1, it's gone in the district, it has gone to the improvement of the electability of Democrats. It's gone from Index 2 from a 50.1 to 49.9 to 49.4 to 50.6. So there was a give and take. Again, looking at the relationships of, and how representatives would be working in these districts. The cleaning up of the split of the town of Eloy, Commissioner Herrera had alluded to, that there's some cleaning up that needs to be done regarding some very minuscule deviation of population. There's probably also some community splits that were unnecessarily made, or unintentionally made, I should say, that could be cleaned up by just getting down to the detail on the block level. So I just wanted to make sure that we had clarification of those points.
Madam Chair, just one additional point on Mr. Sturz's comment. It's 5% on each side, so it's a total of 1%, and it's 1% farther from 50-50 than it was. And we have 4 solidly Republican legislative congressional districts and 2 solidly Democratic voting rights districts. So my goal will be not to degrade the competitiveness of the remaining competitive congressional districts.
Mr. Sturts?
Again, the degradation of is not 5%, it's 0.5%. So I'm not sure what.
I misspoke. I thought I said 0.5%
Okay, 0.5%.
each way for a total of 1%.
Yeah, and in the Democrats, it's 0.8% for a total of 1.6% swing to the improvement of the Democrats in Congressional District 1. These are and we've actually improved the registration, the two-way registration from the new plan to the old plan in registration alone in District 1 from 43.2% Republican and 56.8% Democrat to from 43.2 down to 42.4, and for Republicans, and up from 56.8 to 57.6 in Democrats. So it's probably looking at registration and also looking at competitiveness. One becomes and again looking at minor at the mine inspector race. We now are looking at 1, 2, and 9 at being competitive districts. There are 2 solid Democrat districts and 4 districts that are, in my opinion, solid Republican districts. At the same time, we are meeting with the criteria of all of the other aspects of our constitutional criteria, or getting as very close to them as we can. So,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
are the maps, the maps that Commissioner Sturts has presented, and as well as the change reports, are they available online for the public to view?
I would have to ask.
Buck just gave me the thumbs up that they are up. The change reports are all up. This full packet, Commissioner Sturts, is not up right now, but there is a map, the Google map, the block equivalency file, and the change report for each one of these is now online.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Desmond, have you been able to determine the number of splits in Pinal County?
The number of splits to the county, or the number of split census places? I guess maybe I was.
The number of splits to the county.
I believe it's 5.
And what is our working map?
I believe it's 3.
I just don't want to lose sight of some of the things that we worked so hard to accomplish as we were developing that working draft, because we spent, as I recall, a long day listening to folks from Pinal County being concerned about those splits. So, and we worked hard to come up with a working draft that minimized those splits. So I just don't want to lose sight of that.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
One of the reasons for the added split was actually creating the community that grows from south side of Pinal County into the north side of Pima County, which is the creation of that split. It's a logical split. There are some other areas that are natural because of First Nations. And that's where, and there's one other small split that I think that we could actually accommodate by clipping out of that doesn't necessarily need to be there. So it's a split in one direction versus another. In other words, Pinal was split to keep from Pima being split. So, in my opinion, it's an appropriate trade-off of the splits. And we've also gone from 7 unsplit counties now to 8 unsplit counties. Commissioner McNulty had that as well in her map of Cochise County connecting to Maricopa County, but again, or to the urban Tucson area. Listen, I'm going to let the map stand on its own. Commissioner Herrera alluded to that the public has got full view of this. Look forward to hearing any comments coming from the public on this new approach. Trust me, this is a high-level compromise map. If we want to go back to the map that I presented last Monday, which there's a lot of areas that make a lot more sense than this does from my perspective, but I've looked at this as being a map of compromise, and the resistance that I'm feeling right now immediately from Commissioner McNulty is one that I'm really hoping that we can overcome pretty quickly, because this is a map that I'm working diligently to compromise to have work. If not, I'm going to go back to the map from a week and a half ago and start pressing that forward real hard. This map is a map of compromise. This is looking at some communities and some representatives and the public that came out and spoke to us, and whether or not you have something on some date where Lynn St. Angelo came and give one piece of testimony. We've got volumes and volumes and volumes of folks that say that they want to be kept connected together. And Lynn St. Angelo came out and spoke at one time that said that they want to keep themselves together as a group. So we keep hanging ourselves back on that. So enough said on that.
Any other thoughts, comments?
I have 2 thoughts. One is that we also received dozens of letters from folks in that area who said they looked north and never visit Tucson, or almost seldom visited Tucson. So we have received conflicting comments. The other thing I'd point out while we're having this conversation, because I know we're going to be getting to the issue of, quote, transparency, close quote, later in the meeting, is that all this is happening, right here in this meeting, and folks are watching online, and people are sitting in the room watching, and Mr. Sturts has put together his proposed changes, and they're all here for everyone to see. And it doesn't really matter who he talked to, who he got ideas from. His ideas are here, and they're fully analyzed, and they're presented in data that strategic telemetry has given us, and the consequences of the changes that he would propose to make have been set out for all of us to look at and study. So I just want to make that point when we get to it later, because the proof is in the pudding, and this is the pudding. What Mr. Sturts has laid out here is what he would like to do, and everybody has the ability to look and see how that would work in the state. So it's a very transparent process, and I think this just demonstrates it.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I agree. That this says, I think even when we get the information, I think we've gotten already from our executive director, how transparent we've been in terms of the meetings we've had in the public, how easy it is for us to access the commission, and being able to view this information online or streaming. So we have been extremely transparent. I'm proud of that, and that's why I've asked the executive director as often as he can, preferably at every meeting, mention that and talk about the statistics and how we have been able to reach out to the public, not only through public hearings, but again through these meetings, online streaming, our website. So again, I agree with Commissioner McNulty on those comments about transparency. But I also want to talk about compromise. We're always going to be compromising. The maps aren't done yet. I felt like I've compromised, and so has Commissioner McNulty, and so have you, Commissioner Sturts, and we'll continue to compromise until these maps are done. And the way things are going now, I'm very pleased that we've taken a different approach as opposed to what we've done in the past, especially recently. This is definitely something that I'm, I'll be honest, I was dreading this meeting because what happened in the past and recent past, but today is a completely different tone, and I'm hoping that it stays that way, that we stay cordial and work on compromise and continue to work on compromise. So I'm appreciative of both Commissioner McNulty and you, and hopefully we can stay this way and work on ways that we can agree on.
Thank you. I would echo those sentiments. Any other thoughts? I would like to talk about Congressional District 8, just in looking at Mr. Sturtz's map, and I know it's really hard to look at these things in isolation, and you really can't, because as we know, any changes anywhere affect everything else. But nonetheless, I really do like his Congressional District 8, just in terms of the compactness and his ability to keep the rural in the rural and the urban in the urban. And I'm just wondering what other commissioners' thoughts are on that.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
I agree. I think it's an improvement. I would like to see, some efforts to see with further refinement or iterations whether we could capture more of Peoria. I don't know what the density of the population there is that's being excluded, but if it's lightly populated, it's probably an area it's unpopulated. So it's, okay, I got my answer. Anyway, if that could be an area that could be cleaned up easily if it's an unpopulated area.
Madam Chair,
Ms. McNulty?
I agree. I think hasn't much, looks good. I'd like to understand what the implications are as it works around the map, but I do think it's certainly an improvement in look and concept.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
As I said before, without just looking at what Mr. Commissioner Sturtz has presented, this looks good. I would love to have some time to analyze it further to see what impact it has on the other districts, especially on the competitiveness of District Number 2, which I agree with Commissioner McNulty that we only have 3 competitive districts. Let's keep them truly competitive, and let's not degrade the competition for any of these 3 competitive districts.
Okay. Were there other change reports we wanted to go over, Mr. Desmond, in terms of the congressional map?
No, that was it for congressional. Just
Okay.
the 3, the one that compared change to draft, and then the 2 that were the McNulty and Sturtz to the working.
So what I'm hearing from commissioners is we'd like to look at what Mr. Sturtz created in terms of the different districts and do some deeper analysis on this very thick change report we have in front of us to kind of see what that means vis-a-vis the working map.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Herrera?
I would also, I have had a chance to look at the changes that Commissioner McNulty has proposed, but I would also like to review them a little bit further and comparing them to the Commissioner Sturtz's changes and comparing them side by side. So I will be reviewing both again, hopefully tonight.
Is there anything that Mr. Desmond could do to make that analysis easier? I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just wondering, is there anything? I know Ms. McNulty proposed changes last week. Mr. Sturtz has presented this information. Would it make sense to do any side-by-side analysis or comparison of anything with regard to that? Or, I mean, could it even
What we could
feasibly?
do is we could run the same change report using the 2 maps, and you'd see the differences between the 2, I guess. The 2 change reports are both run off of the same, base working map. So comparing them is a pretty fair comparison. But if you had ideas, I'm sure we could put something together that might facilitate it. Perhaps it would be good to just run the full set of reports on Commissioner McNulty's. I can do that tonight and then email that around so you guys have it tomorrow morning to kind of analyze, and I'll bring copies, hard copies, to tomorrow's meeting.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I did receive a text from a couple of friends who are watching this online, and I was told that they weren't able to find the data for Commissioner Sturts' changes, the map they did, but they weren't able to find the data. Again, this is a text, I'm just a messenger. Please, thank you.
And actually, if Mr. Sturts is amenable, the congressional map modification table that you prepared, is that something that can go on the internet too? I think that would be helpful for the public to see the map improvements step by step.
So
So I don't know if you have this.
I don't have that. Commissioner Sturts, if he has that electronically, he could probably give that to Buck to update.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
the information is up. Do you mind, for the people that are watching, point where they can find that information?
Yes. So if you're at the home page, you click on the Maps section. You have the changes from 12/15. First of all, on the top you have the two working maps. So if you're interested in seeing the working maps, those are both here. But then dated by date are all the changes that the commission has looked at. So from today, there is changes from 12/15. CD McNulty version 2, CD Sturts V2. And then there's 5 legislative changes that we'll look at. So if you click on the Google Maps, that'll take you to map of the state of Arizona. Again, the color is the districts as changed. There's a faint green outline that shows what the old border was, so you can kind of compare. But those are available. You also have a JPEG. That's just the kind of a statewide in most cases, but in some cases where they're very specific changes, more zoomed in map to see what the changes look like. There's a PDF, and that is the change report that the commissioners receive. It's exactly the same. And then there is the DBF. I won't click on that, but that's the block equivalency file for those people that have mapping software and want to load the plans on their own software.
Thanks for walking us through that, and thanks for getting them posted to the website, Buck. Do commissioners have any other things they'd like to mention on the congressional map, or any changes we'd like to explore have Mr. Desmond explore? Okay, hearing none. You have what you need, Mr. Desmond, from us? You'll
Yeah,
just create the
So I'll just
complete-
run the rest of the reports for this. And
Okay.
then we will have those available for you guys tomorrow at the meeting, and I'll try to email those out ahead of time so that you can study those if you have a chance.
Great.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I don't mean to rush you, Mr. Desmond, but if you can get it tonight, that'd be great. The earlier the better, so we can have a chance to review them. I know that we'll be meeting at 4 tomorrow, but I would love to review the information tonight if at all possible.
Okay, we'll see what we can do. I might be able to run them during the break even, so.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Okay. Can we move on to the next agenda item, which is the legislative map? And we have a number of change reports in front of us on this.
Okay, so your first change report is again just comparing the legislative working map to the draft map, so you can see what's been done so far. The changes we have done have all affected voting rights districts. I can go through those again if you like, or we can just jump right in. It's up to you.
Please, can you go over them?
Sure.
And Mr. Desmond, I want to make clear that the working draft, it represents the map that incorporates all the changes to the voting rights districts that have now been sent off for further analysis, but no other changes, correct?
Correct. And in most cases, these are changes designed to strengthen the voting rights districts. There is a instance where we were worried about harming the voting rights districts. That's why that change was then looked at so that it could be analyzed fully. Starting with that particular change, that was the population swap here in legislative districts 1 and 2. The arm that had run into Cochise County was removed so that the District 2 ends at the Santa Cruz County borderline. In order to make up that population, Legislative District 2 picked up the area of Green Valley to try to keep that corridor together. So the changes to Districts 1 and 2. District 4 was one of our voting rights districts, and though it had a strong minority percentage, we were worried about its ability to elect, so that was strengthened in 2 ways. First of all, population was trimmed out in Yuma that did not support the minority candidates of choice. In order to make up some of that population, District 4 took a little population from District 3, another one of our voting rights districts. This did dilute District 3 slightly, although it was a very, very strong district and it helped 4 quite a bit. District 3 then, to balance its population, it shed a little bit in unincorporated areas between Tucson and Picture Rocks and picked up a little bit from District 9 here in Tucson. So District 9 was affected a little bit there. District 11 was affected a little bit also when it grabbed a little bit of population from District 3. Continuing to the north, District 7, the Native American Voting Rights District, shed Greenlee County to District 1. It also shed the non-reservation areas of Mojave County to District 5. It further shed a little population around Doney Park for the Schultz flood area, and it lost Grand Canyon City up in the north. It made up population, though, by incorporating the area of Sun Valley. It also picked up Lakeside and Show Low, just north of the Fort Apache Reservation. I believe that's the only changes that happened outside of Maricopa County. In Maricopa County, District 13 shed a little population to District 14 and District 22. That's a result of District 13 taking on population in Yuma, so it gave some up here. District 24, one of our voting rights districts, shed the Fort McDowell Reservation area and also a little population in South Scottsdale. It did not pick up population anywhere, but by removing some of the lower performing areas, it was able to be strengthened slightly. District 26 was the other area we've changed. Shed population here in Tempe and Mesa. Also, it picked up the town of Guadalupe. As a result of all that population going to District 18, the line between 18 and 17 was adjusted to balance that population. And I believe those are all the changes that have, oh, one other, District 27 went and picked up the portion of the Gila River Reservation that is in Maricopa County. So we did split that reservation, but that was something they had asked for. Are there any questions, or?
Any comments or questions on that? None.
If not, we can go to the change reports. I believe there was 5 changes that we have prepared for today. The first one in the packet is the changes that Commissioner Herrera had asked for. These might overlap slightly with what Commissioner McNulty is going to have later, because she had asked that I look at what Commissioner Herrera had done. But I did want to just go ahead and do this one also, so we had it to look at. Commissioner Herrera had presented a map earlier, I think last week, Monday, that made some changes to Glendale and the West Valley and kind of worked its way around in Phoenix. He asked that I take those changes and overlay them with the working map at this point, and also incorporate changes that Commissioner McNulty had asked for in districts 8 and 11.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Desmond, were you able to put together that map of, I guess I was asking for a combination of Commissioner McNulty's changes and my changes on the legislative side. I can't find a map that has those changes.
I believe that is this one. The changes that Commissioner McNulty had asked for in District 6 and 7 had kind of been incorporated in some of the changes that had happened in District 6 and 7. So the other one was incorporating Districts 8 and 11. So basically what this is the map that you had looked for, working off of the working map. So as it's still like a viable thing to look at, and it's not comparing apples to oranges when you look at the change reports and things. I also did incorporate the changes to 8 and 11 as you had asked for. I should note, Commissioner McNulty also asked for different changes to 8 and 11. I incorporated the first set, so it's possible that for tomorrow you might want to incorporate a different set of those changes, and we can go over that. But the changes here, and Commissioner Herrera, you can go through these again if you like, or I can walk through them again.
Madam Chair. Mr. Desmond, do you mind going through them? Honestly, I came a little bit unprepared, so if you don't mind going through them.
No problem. We started with removing splits to Glendale. Glendale was, in the draft map, it's split 6 times, or in 6 pieces, so it's split 5 times. The green line is the old districts. So the portion from Legislative District 21 and 20 is combined together and given to District 22. What this does is it removes 2 of the splits, so Glendale is now in 4 districts. Practically speaking, it's pretty much in 3 districts, but it's in 3 main pieces here. As a result of District 21 losing some of its population, it expands out and takes in more of Peoria from District 22. That helps to balance. District 20 also lost population by not having any portion of Glendale, so it grabs a little bit from 22 also, and also it grabs parts of Phoenix from District 15. 15 then makes up that population from 22, so it's kind of like a 3-way trade. And what that does is it keeps New River together, it removes the split of New River, keeps Anthem with New River and with Cave Creek and Carefree. District 28, District 15 also comes down and removes Paradise Valley from District 28. That was intended to try to make 28 a more competitive district. District 28 makes up some of the population that it loses by taking portions from 15 and 20, and also, actually I think that's it. portions from 15 and 20. So I guess the main points are that Glendale is split less, goes from from 6 pieces to 4 pieces. New River and Anthem are kept whole and together, and District 28 becomes more competitive. The other changes that are incorporated into this map that weren't in the last ones are the changes to District 8 and 11, attempting to make a more competitive district in that area. Those are changes that Commissioner McNulty had asked for earlier, and that we'll be going over a little bit later, I imagine. But that was the initial change that would make District 8 more competitive.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Desmond, do me a favor, and can you go over or around the boundaries of 28?
Yes. So at the north, it's Union Hills. It follows 7th Street South till I'm not sure there's really a road there, but it kind of where Cactus comes across. Follows Cactus to 35th Avenue South, over on Peoria, south on 43rd, goes back east on Olive and West Dunlap, goes south then again on 19th, over on Northern, south on, I believe this is 7th Avenue. I'm not sure what road this is between Camelback and Bethany Home. Missouri. Runs south on 24th, east again on, looks like Sells. Oh, over on Campbell, excuse me. South on 35th, east on Indian School. East on Thomas until it hits the Scottsdale border, follows the Scottsdale border until it hits Paradise Valley border, and it follows that around until it hits Tatum Boulevard. Up here, it jogs around. This is again Thunderbird, follows Tatum up. Paradise Village Parkway. I'm not sure what road this is. This is Thunderbird to the north, then it comes back south on 39th, over on Cactus, and I believe back to where we started.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
You know, one of the things I wanted to do is obviously follow the 4 state mandated criteria, but we also wanted to try to see if I can create as many competitive districts as possible while respecting and balancing all the criteria. So that's why 28, I ended up working with 28 a little more because I thought that we could create a competitive district, especially in 28. So hopefully people have some ideas to be able to improve it. And keep the competitiveness, but I thought that I think we owe it to the people of Arizona. They wanted competition, and they are getting it in these maps.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
here are some concerns I have. Mr. Desmond, could you put the block layer up again?
Okay. Put it on top of the census place so we can still see it. Jeff, is there an area you want me to zoom into?
Yeah, thanks. Because sometimes the block layer reveals some geographic features that are in there. First of all, 15 has been made significantly less compact. It now has this narrow neck that goes and swallows Paradise Valley. Paradise Valley is connected to this region only by Tatum Boulevard, I believe, which runs along this western border there. Paradise Valley is also separated from its community of interest, which is the Biltmore area, Arcadia, and north central Phoenix area. There's been plenty of public comment to that effect. That is not only an area there where I live, but it's where I'm from, so I've got a lot of my own personal experience living right in that neck of the woods. It also, I believe, when you were going through the boundaries earlier, I believe even up here with this neck, you've got Paradise Valley Mall and then some small cluster of homes just sort of cut off just to the north of PV Mall. You've also got this area up here that is separated by the mountain preserve. The old 28 sort of encompassed all that area. I think the old 28 had to make some compromises because some of the neighborhoods that I might ordinarily perhaps include in that district were needed to be put in this coalition district, which is District 24. It looked like from the splits report that 24 was changed. Is that correct, Mr. Desmond? Was there a modification to 24? Because I'm seeing it show up here on the analysis.
24 was changed, but it doesn't look like any population moved. What most likely happened is an unincorporated block or something came in.
Okay.
So the change report just looks for, at the block level, anyone that moved from one district to another. So,
Okay, I'm seeing all zeros there, yeah.
so that happens sometimes when there are, maybe some areas around the fringes that if you move by like a block group, it might take one. If you're looking at the upper left-hand corner, you might not notice in the bottom right-hand corner a small portion might get moved from one of the districts, but there was no population moved. That's the same case with districts 4 and 6 on the front. You'll notice there must have been a block or two that was affected, but no population.
Okay. And, since I view that as a significant detriment to the achievement of the other goals, and since we've never completed a true baseline map, it's really, I don't think we have a true measure of what the significant detriment really is or constitutes, but at least between the working draft and this draft, that strikes me most very clearly as a significant detriment. When I looked at this area of the map, and perhaps it's something that could be worked on for tomorrow, I was kind of focused on this District 20. It's now been changed in this, what's up on the screen here, but it looked like a district that could have been made much more compact and more sensible boundaries used. And in so doing, I thought that on the working draft, District 15 did not include the New River area, and that, that change could be accommodated. New River could be added to 15. Some adjustments, some populations adjustments could be made between 15 and 28, which I believe was already overpopulated slightly. And then some other exchanges could be made between 20 and 15 and 20 and 22, which would yield 4 much more compact districts with using sensible boundaries, and what I mean by that is either following a geographic feature or a major arterial, or I-17 in some instances, which I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but perhaps we can talk about that later.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
this was my first crack at trying to create more competitive districts on the legislative side, so I admit, there are some things that we can do to clean this up, but I would challenge anyone that's going to, do their own changes, that hopefully we can keep 28 competitive as it is in my version of the legislative district map that I submitted. So, and not only 28, but also the other ones that I was able to make more competitive. So I want our commissioners to keep that in mind when they make those changes, that, competition is important, and if you can make changes to improve the other criteria, the other state mandated criteria, hopefully competition is one we don't ignore.
Madam Chair. I don't mean to be critical at all of the effort. I have to state that I'm critical of the result, but perhaps it's something we can all work on.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Mr. Desmond, where is this consolidated map located currently on our website?
If you go to the maps page, there's a red box on the very top. It has the 2 working maps in there. You can get those there.
No, Madam Chair? But Mr. Desmond, I'm talking about the inclusions of Commissioner Herrera's adjustments.
Oh, that would be Commissioner Herrera. It's this one right here. It says LD Herrera Maricopa.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Desmond, does that particular map include Commissioner McNulty's changes? Is it a combination? Just want to confirm.
Excuse me?
Is that a combination of my changes with Commissioner McNulty's proposed changes?
That is a combination of your changes with her changes previously to Districts 8 and 11, not with changes she'll have today.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
And the reason why I think you addressed it, Mr. Desmond, there were some contradictory changes because I was looking for a combo, because you had requested that, to look at, over the last couple of days and didn't see it. So I guess it was an apples and oranges thing, and it got difficult to analyze. So is it possible to combine those 2 sets of requested changes?
To some extent, but the changes that Commissioner McNulty makes today, in some areas will conflict with the changes that Commissioner Herrera made. So we could work together to combine those, but they don't. It's not like one set of changes deals with one part of the state, set of changes deals with another. They do deal with the same areas.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I haven't seen those changes that are the new changes that are being proposed by Commissioner McNulty. So before we combine them, I'd love to see what those changes are. Hopefully I'm assuming we'll do that next or soon.
Yeah, and that was my thinking for not obviously including those, because I just included the ones you had seen and mentioned.
Okay.
I also purposely have tried to break these changes out where possible, so that if there are aspects of a particular map that the commissioners like, it's easier to kind of go back and evaluate just those particular aspects. So in some respect, I have been purposely trying to keep the changes isolated from one another. Also, that allows a little bit more flexibility should certain changes be adopted and not others. But if there are particular things you'd like to see grouped together, let me know, and I'll put those into a common map.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I had a question for Commissioner Herrera. If you had said this was your first crack at making these adjustments, of the districts that you've worked on, which ones are the districts that you think that you really nailed, that you really analyzed down to really put a tremendous amount of thought and contemplation into, that you feel very comfortable that you like a lot?
Commissioner Sturts, I don't think I nailed any of them. I really think that I worked along with Mr. Desmond, that we worked at trying to create as many competitive districts as possible while balancing the other criteria. But I think I like the aspects of some of the changes that I make. For example, and I'm going to allude to 28, where we were able to create a little more competitive district in 28. So there's aspects of each of the changes that I made that I do like, that I like to hopefully see incorporated in Commissioner McNulty's changes. So again, I don't mean to say that that I'm not happy with the work I did, but I think there's changes that I liked, and there's changes that I didn't like, and I'm looking forward to see what recommendations Commissioner McNulty recommends, because I think there's some overlap, and I'm assuming based on Mr. Desmond's comments that she made some changes to 28. So I'm looking forward to seeing what changes she made to 28 to see where the overlap is.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
And I think that the purpose of my question might be obvious, that if there's something that, if there's an area in this that other than just the general overview of competitiveness and the attempt to gather those together, if there's a neighborhood or a district that you really thought that was really tight the way that you wanted it to be, then my view of this is that, because tonight and tomorrow morning, I'm going to be taking a look at your work, Commissioner McNulty's work, the working map, and making adjustments to those as I'm seeing it. And if there's some that you have really have a heart for, then I want to respect that and say I'm not going to wholly throw that piece out. So that's the intent of asking the question.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Commissioner Sturts, I appreciate that. But again, there's nothing that any changes that I made that are set in stone or that I'm fixed to. But again, I think and I'm focusing on 28 because I felt that we could make 28 competitive when it wasn't before. So if I'm going to look at anything that I'm maybe, that I think that I did a better job on, and I know that Commissioner Freeman has his issues with this, with 28. But again, I felt that we can definitely create a more competitive district in 28. So I'm looking, want to see what the other recommendations are made to keep it competitive or even make it more competitive.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
What the great thing about you and Commissioner Freeman both residing up here is that you've got the areas in your experience in your life of being up here. I've had the great pleasure of doing business up here for the last 20 some odd years and owning real estate in almost all four corners of Maricopa County. So I've got a pretty good understanding of the area, the community, the connectivity, and we'll be looking forward to laying over some of that experience into this as I take a look at this. And what I'll do is I'll do a very similar approach as I did today with the congressionals when I come back with this tomorrow night.
Okay. I think we'll take a really quick break. It's 2:54. If commissioners could try to be back really within 6 minutes or so, that would be great. Thanks. And we're in the midst of discussing these legislative change reports that Mr. Desmond prepared. And we can continue doing that. Are there a lot of legislative change reports? And the reason I ask is I have to depart at 4 p.m. today,
Okay.
but commissioners are welcome to continue working.
Commissioner McNulty has one. Commissioner Freeman has one. And then there are 2 changes to districts 8 and 11 that we can probably look at fairly quickly or right next to each other. So there is 4 more.
Okay, and then we also have some public comment that I wanted to get to.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
the change that Mr. Desmond prepared is not something we need to discuss today, or at least my change report. And then I've got a judicial reception at 5, and I, as you can see, I forgot my jacket, so I'm going to have to run home, so I may be leaving about the same time you have to depart.
Okay. And I guess that when Vice Chair Herrera comes back, if he and Commissioners McNulty and Sturts want to keep going, they can, or we're going to meet again tomorrow at 4 p.m. So,
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I think that with the folks that are here today, that if all 5 commissioners can hear the testimony that they'll be bringing, it's all going to be relevant to the legislative designs. It's going to give, I'm speaking only for myself now, the opportunity to go through the splits reports, to go over the information that the Commissioners Herrera, McNulty, and Freeman have put together. And I'm comfortable from my perspective, in getting public testimony and then adjourning when you and Commissioner Freeman have got to depart.
Okay. Well, I've got about 8 requests to speak forms, I think.
Could we do, just check to see if any commissioners have changes they'd like me to prepare for tomorrow's meetings then? If we want to do that first, and then.
Yes, definitely. Actually, I have 10.
Madam Chair,
Mr.
I would like, I kind of outlined some changes I'd like to look at on the LD map a few minutes ago, and perhaps I can put a little more meat on the bones with Mr. Desmond tonight and get something rolled out tomorrow, perhaps.
Okay.
And Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
as I said earlier, I'll be preparing something very similarly for Mr. Desmond as I prepared last night. And the good thing about Mr. Desmond is that he can turn around, he's set up to turn these things around very quickly. So, and I truly appreciate that.
Okay.
All right.
So it's 3:10, and if we limit public comment to 3 minutes each, we can do that in a half an hour with the numbers of request to speak forms I have. So we have some time to talk some more about legislative maps. And then there's a couple other items on the agenda today. There's the transparency discussion that we've talked about in terms of executive session transcripts, as well as the logging of communications. Is that something we can carry over, or do we need to discuss that today, or what do you recommend, legal counsel?
Madam Chair, we can cover that today briefly, or we can carry it over. Those are items that we had been asked to address the commission on, so I'm not sure if there's any sense of urgency unless the commission would like to know sooner rather than later what our advice is.
Okay, and the other item is the executive director report. Ray, did you have things, or is there anything we need to cover? Probably, so.
Everything I have, we could cover tomorrow.
It's on the agenda for
Right,
tomorrow? Good.
Right. It just, I have the generic, and some of it's to bring what's on your, in your packet, so I can really tomorrow update and then answer any questions or follow up on items you'd like. Oh, beg your pardon. We need one start time for Tuesday. What time would you like to start on Tuesday? It's nice to have Jiminy Cricket. We don't have that yet. That's the one thing we would like to know as a part of the director's report is what time would you like to start?
What time would commissioners like to start for a meeting on Tuesday?
Anytime's okay with me.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock?
1 o'clock it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we have a few minutes to talk just about legislative draft map, just maybe like 5 minutes. Is there anything we can go over in that amount of time?
It's up to Commissioner McNulty if she wants to try to go over hers right now, or if she wants to wait till after tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to do them all together. So
What did you say?
I think it makes more sense to do them all together so we have the context.
Okay.
Yeah, Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
why only 5 minutes left?
Because we have a number of requests to speak forms, and if we limit that to 3 minutes each, that's going to take a half an hour.
Do we have to be out of here by a certain time?
I have to leave at 4,
Oh, okay.
and Mr. Freeman has to depart too.
Okay. Thank you.
We can obviously go over them after 4 and then again tomorrow, if that's helpful.
I just thought if there was a way to cover any of it today, it might be good to at least get our feet wet to be thinking about it for tomorrow.
Well, I'd be happy to summarize what I had asked Mr. Desmond to do, and then he could
Okay.
get started, and then we might just want to go back and revisit it once we, but I had, when I participated for a short time on the phone on Monday, I had asked him to look at 4 things, as I recall. One was the West District, I don't know if that's the West Valley or west of the West Valley, but where Legislative District 13, which includes North Yuma and the southwest portion of Maricopa County on that arm, I had asked him to look at improving that and at the prospect of bringing La Paz County into Yuma County and taking in some of the western areas of Maricopa County, perhaps the more rural western areas of Maricopa County, and see what would be needed to accomplish that, to address a number of the comments we had heard, including Ms. Pancrazi's comments. And then I had asked him to look at the West Valley, the areas around that Mr. Herrera had worked on in Glendale, to look at consolidating one of those districts, one or more of those districts, into an emerging competitive district, because you'll recall that when we worked on the congressional maps, I was focused on that area. There are some emerging Hispanic communities there. I wanted to work on combining those communities into one district that would emerge into a competitive district. So I asked him to look at that based on both the working draft and on what Mr. Herrera had done. In LD 28, I too very strongly support the idea of another competitive legislative district in Phoenix. I've said several times that we've got more than 4 million people in the valley. Competitiveness is one of the 6 criteria. We're to favor it so long as it doesn't substantially deter any of the other criteria. And so I had asked him to look at other ways of maintaining or enhancing the competitiveness of District 28, so that we had a couple of alternatives to look at. And then with regard to legislative districts 11 and 8, I had asked him to work on keeping the Copper Corridor communities whole in 8 and maintaining the competitiveness of that, but at the same time looking at ways that we might divide 8 and 11, either by using the I-10 corridor and or by splitting only one of the 2 communities, either Casa Grande or Eloy.
Madam Chair,
Thank you. Mr. Herrera?
a couple of things. Commissioner McNulty, did you change at all the majority-minority districts?
Well, I didn't change anything, actually. I just asked Mr. Desmond to look at those things, but I don't think any of those would have implicated any changes to any of the majority-minority districts.
Okay. I appreciate that. I can't stress the importance, if we want to move forward, not to be messing with the majority-minority districts until the analysis comes back. And hopefully, once the analysis gets back, we can either decide to, if changes are needed, we'll make the changes. If we feel that the changes or the way they stand would meet DOJ approval, then we should approve them and then start working on the rest of the districts. But let me, Commissioner McNulty, if you can tell me the competitiveness of 28 as you have it, using Index 2?
As Mr. Desmond redrew it?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll have to have him tell us that, because I'm seeing these as you're seeing them. Sorry.
Using Index 2, the district is 54.8% Republican, 45.2% Democratic.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I'm looking at the change report for the ones that for the one I submitted, and there's the Republican is 52.6, Democratic is 47.4, so hopefully we can work on getting 28 as competitive as possible, probably closer to 47. Then I think the 47 margin is something that we can achieve and get 28 to be definitely more competitive than it is now.
Okay. Did anyone else want to talk about any proposed changes that they've asked Mr. Desmond to do in terms of what Ms. McNulty just did? Kind of giving an overview.
And Madam Chair, I think it's understood that even as we make things more competitive, Mr. Desmond always is mindful of the other constitutional criteria along the ways, so that there's no significant detriment in that process.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
When Mr. Desmond sat down with me to make those changes that I had proposed, we were reminding each other every time when we made a change, okay, how does this affect this criteria? And I'm looking at the 4 state criteria, not the federal, not the 2 federal ones, and we were making sure that we always had them in mind anytime we were making changes. So thank you, Ms. O'Grady, for the reminder.
Sure.
Mr. Sturts?
I'll ask the same question about the legislative majority-minority districts. In your, this is moving through, Dr. King is in the process of providing analysis?
Yes, he's,
And in your conversation with Dr. King, what have you heard so far? Are we on the right track? Are these, are we needing to continue to enhance these 10 districts? Is there any concern regarding District 24 and its design as it sort of serpentines through the valley? Just I'm trying to get some sort of an idea about where you're sensing that this is going.
Madam Chair, could I interrupt you just for a minute? That brings to mind the question that, is Mr. Adelson going to be with us here tomorrow?
He is, actually.
right.
Mr. Adelson is going to be at our meeting
Thinking
tomorrow.
about the complexity of the way he answers those questions, my thought might be it might be best to have him answer the question.
Thank you, yeah.
Might be hard for Mr. Desmond to do it.
I'm asking for passing the secret right now, and if Mr. Adelson's going to be here tomorrow, terrific.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
I think somebody can answer, whether it be probably Mary O'Grady or Joe Canfield, if any of the commissioners propose a change to any of the majority-minority districts as they stand now, would we have to submit those for analysis again and then wait either a week, week and a half, possibly 2 weeks for that to get back? So, the reason I'm asking this, I want to be able to understand what the consequences are of making changes again to the majority-minority districts without waiting for the analysis to come back.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, and I mean, obviously they'd need to start that, at least that area, affected area, over in terms of the analysis. But as terms of whether, how much that slows things down or doesn't slow things down, it would depend on the scope of the change. So, but they would need to resubmit those portions for the analysis. But I don't know how significant it would affect the timing of things.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I think Mr. Grady, I think it would slow things down. I mean, we still haven't gotten the changes that we proposed, or the analysis that we sent in for, the proposed changes that we sent in for the analysis. We haven't received that yet, and I don't know when we'll get them. So I would probably venture to say that if anybody makes changes, let's just say Friday or the next week, they'll follow the same process, and it'll take as long as it is taking now, maybe longer, or am I reading it incorrectly?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, again, any change may be just to one district. Now we're analyzing all the districts, plus we're analyzing the congressional. So I think it just depends on the scope of the change and how many districts are affected and that sort of thing. But it would obviously take some time. And I don't know if Willie has a different view of it.
Okay. Anything else on legislative that we want to discuss? And thanks, Mr. Desmond, for getting all these change reports prepared for us. We'll go into them more detail tomorrow when we have more time. Do we want to do number 5? You mentioned, Mr. Canfield, it would be short in terms of legal advice, discussion, and possible action on release of executive session transcript/minutes. Commission may vote to go into executive session.
Madam Chair, I can give very abbreviated advice, and if the commission wants me to expand upon it, I'd be happy to do that. The question had come up with respect to whether the commission should or can release its executive session transcripts, and that question came up specifically in light of Judge Fink's ruling last week that the open meeting law does not apply to the commission, and therefore certain executive session discussions could or should be made available to the public. Our advice, and I think I may have mentioned this when this came up before, would be to refrain from releasing those transcripts until this case is fully resolved. As we know, the county attorney has already indicated that he plans to file his appeal. We finalized the judgment today. It was stipulated to with the county attorney. The notice of appeal will be forthcoming, and until the legal issues are settled upon appellate review, our advice would be to refrain from taking any action that could be implicated by a contrary decision on appeal.
Any questions for Mr. Canfield?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Freeman?
Mr. Canfield, what would be the legal basis? We have an order from a Superior Court judge saying that the open meeting law does not apply. I would think if we don't have a basis to keep them confidential, I suppose someone could run in and ask for a stay of the ruling pending an appeal, but I'm not aware of that having happened. So what would be the basis for us to withhold those from the public?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, the basis would be the lack of finality to the decision, and that it could be overturned on appeal, and that if the commission chooses to release those transcripts and the appellate courts decide that the open meeting law does in fact apply to the commission, then the commission will have effectively violated the law, and there would be no way to remedy that violation having the transcripts been released. So our advice at this time would be not to do that until there's some finality. I mean, the commission can overrule our advice, of course, and proceed accordingly, but that's what our advice would be at this point in time.
Mr. Canfield, it's within the prerogative of this commission anyway to release them anyway. I believe the first commission on a number of occasions came out of executive session and then turned around and voted to make the record of the hearing public. So we could do that anyway, couldn't we?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, the commission can discuss in open session decisions that were reached in executive session. Obviously, there shouldn't be decisions reached in executive session, but the way the open meeting law works is that those discussions that result in a decision need to be done in open session, so that may be what you're speaking about. But it's in terms of just simply releasing executive session transcripts, we've looked at this issue before. I know it's come up and it's been on commission agendas in the past. Our best reading of the law is that executive session transcripts under the open meeting law have to be kept confidential, so the only way to release them would be through a court order or through some agreement with the Attorney General, the county attorney, who are able under the law to review those transcripts in certain situations. So we are wishing to proceed cautiously, especially in light of all the intense legal scrutiny upon the commission with respect to these laws. And our best reading and best advice at this time, again, is that the commission not release those transcripts until the law is completely settled on the question of the open meeting law's applicability to the commission.
And Madam Chair, I have one more thing. I agree with Joe's advice on that point. And even if the open meeting law doesn't apply to the commission as Judge Fink ruled, the commission, as Judge Fink also ruled, would still have the ability to go into executive session and receive legal advice. And some of these executive sessions also concerned the review of confidential documents. And so even after the lawsuit's over, these don't automatically become public record. There's still some element of discretion on the part of the commission because of the attorney-client advice and the review of confidential materials.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
You know, I appreciate the advice of our counsel, and one thing I don't want to do is to be able to make a decision now for the benefit of this particular commission that might affect negatively the future commissions, and I see possibly releasing the executive meeting minutes, releasing and making them public. I would love to see or love to know how it would impact future commissions, and we don't know that, and I would ask all our commissioners to seek the advice of our counsel and see what happens if there is an appeal. But even if there isn't an appeal, or if the ruling stands, for us to think, okay, any decisions we make now, how will it affect future commissions? And is it in the best interest of future commissions for us to do X, Y, and Z? And I implore that we all keep that in mind when we make decisions like this.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Freeman?
Well, council was, and I apologize, the acoustics in here are not the best, and I'm having a hard time getting every word, but was the first commission then in error when it moved to make public records of executive sessions that conducted?
Freeman, I'm not aware of the specific decision that you're referring to, but we can check into that and give you a response. I'm not aware of the fact-specific situation.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Freeman, I'm not either, and I may be in error, but I seem to recall Commissioner Huntworth's testimony before the legislature where he suggested that this commission could make those executive sessions public from the prior commission. So that suggested to me that that commission had not done that. But I don't know. I may be in error. So if that's not the case, please let us know. We can follow up.
It's been a while since I've reviewed those transcripts, but it was my recollection there might have been an instance or two or several where they came back the next day and deliberated and said, you know, yesterday wasn't appropriate for us to do that under the cloak of executive session, so they just moved and made the records public. I might be misremembering that, but that's something I vaguely recall occurring.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
Mr. Canfield, and Mr. Grady, have we, as this commission, released any executive meeting minutes for the meeting public?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, no.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
My view of this is pretty a little bit more layman than the attorneys that are flanking me, and that's that when the public wanted this taken out of the basement of the legislature and put it out into the public, they wanted it to be open and transparent. It's been clearly stated over and over and over again by all 5 of the people up at this table that this is an open process. The test of the open meeting law was put forth by the Attorney General and then moved over to the Maricopa County Attorney, and a ruling was made saying that the open meeting law doesn't apply. It states in the Constitution that we're to hold all of our meetings, that all of our business meetings are to be open to the public. And in regards to any legal attorney-client privilege documents or information that might take place in executive session, I could see clearly that information should be redacted from the release, but I still contend that it's in the best interest of this commission to release the executive session documents, redact the information that would be considered attorney-client privilege. Madam Chair has put this out there in the past that she wanted to have this done, and I think that it's in the public's best interest to hear and to see what we do, and that we're to be as transparent as possible. Good, bad, or otherwise. They might enjoy what was done in executive session. It might be just more information. We've had tons of meetings in public, and we've had hours of meetings in executive session. My recommendation is to get it out there and redact the attorney-client privilege components of it, and get it out in the hands of the public.
Madam Chair?
Before we move on, Mr. Herrera, I just want to remind everybody we only have 28 minutes now left of the meeting, and we have at least 10 requests to speak forms. So we're either going to probably have to, if there's going to be more discussion on this matter, because I don't want to limit debate or anything, I just want to be mindful of the time.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
No, I completely agree, and I'll be as quick as possible. We have, we've been doing everything possible to avoid going into executive session. The times that we have gone, I mean, especially initially, SPO, the State Procurement Office, required us to. After that, we got into litigation, and our attorneys, which are Republican and Democratic attorneys, advised us to. So I don't remember a time where we decided to go into executive session just for the hell of it. No, most of the time, all of the time, was because we actually were required to. And I trust our attorneys, I trust the State Procurement Office that they did the right thing for us to go into executive session. But as I stated before, we've done a lot, and I think Mr. Bladine will probably update us on the number of times we've met in the open versus the number of times we've had executive session minutes, executive session, whether it be in minutes or hours, but also let's, not only the public, our public, the business meetings that we've had when we've got out in the public, two different rounds, and compare that to what happened before the Prop 106 started. I mean, I wasn't following the process when the legislators had control of this, but I guarantee you, I have a sense that it wasn't anything like this. They were truly doing it in the back rooms. Without public comment. So things are completely different now, and I think people are satisfied with the way we're handling things. So I am, and I think people that approach the STAR as well.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Because this is an action item, I'm going to go ahead and move to have the executive session meeting minutes released to the public with the attorney-client privileged information redacted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion?
Madam Chair, I'll just add briefly my perspective. We were in executive session for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only, because we, on the advice of the Attorney General's office, chose to follow some of the aspects of the State Procurement Code. We were citizen volunteers. We didn't know anything about the Procurement Code. We did it on their advice because we thought it would help promote confidence in the public. It turned out to be that was not the case, but 90% of our executive sessions, I would venture to say, were as a result of that. This whole question is about the independence of this commission. We've talked a lot about that in the last 6 months. I think that's paramount. As I've said before from this dais, before this is all said and done, everything that was said or everything that happened here, I'm sure will become public. There's nothing that we talked about in those executive sessions that bear on the maps that we've drawn. That's all been done in this room or rooms like this where everyone can see what we're doing and what the implications of those actions are. And my vote will be to follow the advice of counsel and not to disclose those transcripts, at least at the present time. There may come a time when it's appropriate to do that, but what we should be doing right now is finishing these maps. That's the job we should be doing right now, and I think releasing these transcripts now is just a distraction. It's unnecessary. There may come a time when we should do it, but that time is not right now.
Any other discussion?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner McNulty. I really do think that we have just a huge amount of work ahead of us in trying to come up with agreements on the congressional and legislative map. We're not finished yet, and I'm assuming we're close, but I don't know. I don't think any of us know how close we are. So to me, I agree that this is something that is a distraction, and we should listen to our attorneys and also think about the future of this commission, because in a couple of years we'll be out of this, and there'll be new people appointed. So I want to keep the independence of the commission, and until our attorneys advises otherwise, let's stay the course and see what happens.
Any other discussion?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I don't think that this jeopardizes, first of all, this isn't a distraction. Second, this is an action item. Third, this is the next series of events that took place after the ruling by Judge Fink. Third, this is not jeopardizing the independence of this commission or any future commission by showing and continuing to be completely transparent. And I'm all in favor of shining a bright sunlight, and it's a great way for the public to understand what we're doing, and it would clear up any potential last lingering thoughts that the public might have that we are not acting completely independently. And upon that note, if there's no other discussion,
Madam Chair,
question.
I'm sorry, one more comment. I think the public has a pretty good idea of what we're doing. I mean, as I stated before, not only these meetings, the first round and public round of hearings, but also the recent rulings. I mean, the recent rulings were in the favor of the commission, both of them, that everything we've been accused of not only by outside influence, but also influences within the commission have proven to have no merit. And we won, and I think the public is extremely comfortable with the work we're doing. I don't know what else we need to do, but I'm very comfortable with what we have done, and I'm comfortable following the advice of our attorneys.
Any other discussion? So all in favor of releasing the executive session transcripts / minutes that Mr. Sturts has motioned and Mr. Freeman seconded?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Nay. And I'd like to just say briefly that I also believe that releasing those executive session transcripts would instill even greater confidence in our process, and I hope that there will come a time when we can actually do that. But I believe in following the advice of legal counsel. Both legal counsel, Joe Canefield and Mary O'Grady, were unanimous in this regard, and that is why I voted the way I did. So with that, we're going to move on, but the next item is the logging of communications, and I'm going to see with legal counsel, can we carry that over to a future meeting?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Great. So we'll do that at another time and go straight to public comment. There isn't anything from legal on the open meeting law, is there, in terms of the item number 7?
Madam Chair, real quick, today we entered into a stipulation with the county attorney as to the form of judgment, and that has been filed with the Superior Court.
Okay. Any questions or comments from anybody on that?
I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat that again?
Sorry, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hare, I was just on the case, the open meeting law case. Today we entered into a stipulation as to the form of judgment, the final judgment in the case, and this is how the final ruling will read and be signed by the judge. The judge had asked us to work with the county attorney to come to agreement on how that final order should read. We were able to reach agreement with the county attorney and file that for the judge's consideration today.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move to public comment, and if we could limit comments to 2 minutes now, because our comments, our discussion went longer than intended, but that would still give everyone a chance to speak. If you could come up to the microphone and spell your last name so that we get an accurate accounting for the transcript, that would be great. Our first speaker is State Representative Richard Miranda from Tolleson. Okay. Our next speaker is Luis Gonzalez from the Pascua Yaqui tribe. He's a councilman.
Good afternoon. Luis Gonzalez, Gonzales, address 7444, South Camino Benham.
Oh, and you don't need to give,
Okay.
please don't give your addresses to us.
All right.
It's okay, thank you. We'll strike that from the record.
Okay, well, good afternoon. Before you again, this is my 4th time, and the last times that I presented was in behalf in reference to the constituency that I have for the Pascua Yaqui tribe. In fact, right now, today, I'm here in reference to the town of Guadalupe, where we have our constituency of over 3,000 people there. I do believe that moving Guadalupe into the other district that we're looking at right now that's being proposed, a lot of the membership do not agree with it. I do not agree with it as well either. I've try to get a lot of people here, but it's difficult during the weekday. As I mentioned before, I think it's the community of interest that we have currently with the South Mountain area, Phoenix area. I think it's good. 2 things that I just want to emphasize. One is education. We do have a satellite office in Guadalupe that was opened back in '89. We also the South Mountain Community College. The central one is on 24th Street. that was built in 1980. Our members from Guadalupe, Guadalupe as a whole, the community goes there. That's one commonality we have in reference to the community interest. The second one is religion and language. I'm going to speak with reference to religion. We have tomorrow, the Fiesta de Virgen de Guadalupe. There's a big festival that's happening within Guadalupe, but there's a lot of people that speak Spanish, but also come from the Phoenix area. There's hundreds, more or less thousands of people that come there. But one of the commonalities we have in South Phoenix is the back and forth, not only with religion, language, but also in reference to work. In the baseline area, we have, back then, 50 years ago, we had areas of Chinese fields where we all used to work as well too. And that's where we have the commonality and the common interest with the people of South Phoenix as well too. But those are some of the ties, and I really would like the commission.
You can finish your thought there.
To really consider maintaining Guadalupe where it is right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sally Ann Gonzalez, representing Guadalupe and State Representative.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. Gonzalez, Gonzales. I am here representing, I'd actually like to speak both on my district in Tucson, District 3. I did not know of any changes that was happening. I was unfortunately concentrating on the changes for the town of Guadalupe. And I saw a little bit of what was up there. I'll have to go back and look into it and maybe write some written comments. I certainly do not or oppose the changes that District 3 is losing on the south end that are surrounding the Tohono O'odham, San Javier district area. The Hispanic community in that area is closer related to the Tohono O'odham in that area, and we're going to lose that and gain up on the northeast side of the District 3, and the majority of the population is in District that we're losing has closer ties together than the ones that we're gaining up in the northeast in that quadrant. But I'll have to look at those again. Like I said, I was concentrating on the Guadalupe area. Really quickly, going on to the proposed District 26, the town of Guadalupe. I am president of the Guadalupe CDC, have been for the last 8 years, and we concentrate our efforts in building moderate to low-income housing for the citizens of Guadalupe in conjunction with the town of Guadalupe and other entities within there. So we have built the two apartment complexes, one for senior and one for multi-family complexes at the north end of the town that include 76 of the multi-family and 32 for senior citizens. And I'd like to let you know that Guadalupe is a unique community, but it has closer ties to the South Phoenix area that it is now currently. And I'm asking you to leave it there because for the first time in history, in the 2010 elections, we had one Guadalupe member running for the legislature. That was the first time in history. I believe that those kind of chances of Guadalupe members getting to be able to elect a person of their liking is going to be null and void if you move them to District 26 in the Tempe Mesa area. We've been working hard to get a voice in the community of Guadalupe, and I really stress that you leave them in in your current proposed District 27. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandra Gonzalez, representing District 16, Guadalupe.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mathis and members. For the record, my name is Sandra Gonzalez, Gonzales. Boy, I must say how difficult the IRC made it for us to work as a working community member to be here. At 9 a.m. there was more community members, but it was changed from 9 to 1. The Saturday meeting is canceled. But having the meeting take place during the day when working families are working is just awful. My connections to Guadalupe are many. I was raised in Guadalupe. It is home to my 8-member family, along with many aunts, uncles, cousins, and many extended family, as well as my 85-year-old grandmother, we are blessed here to have with us today. Growing up in Guadalupe, my parents were no close to services, public safety, no police, no fire protection, no ambulance service, no trash collection, no paved streets. Things have gotten better. I can only remember the dirt road and old photographs, and now my children will know Guadalupe with the sidewalks and roads that they have now. Not great, but nonetheless roads. I was the first community member to run for the legislative seat. It was an honor. Having Guadalupe in District 17, I think would be devastating for our people and our community. It would not provide my children the same opportunity. As my oldest is a year and a half away from becoming a registered voter, all I ask is that you keep it where it is right now with 16. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Gino Turrubiartes from Guadalupe.
Gino, G-I-N-O, last name T as in Tom, U-R-R-U, B as in boy, I-A-R-T-E-S. Very well pronounced. You continue there, Madam Chair. I'm reading this letter on behalf of the Mayor of Guadalupe, dated December 15th, 2011. The town of Guadalupe has come before the commission and has asked that Guadalupe stay in Legislative District 27, where a true community of interest exists and has commonality with other neighboring communities to the west. A true community of interest would exist for all. The IRC in its creation was to provide a fair and equitable distribution of population, especially when it comes to the community of interest. The town of Guadalupe is situated in the Phoenix metropolitan area, where almost 5,500 population is residing in an area less than 1 square mile. The town of Guadalupe covers an area of approximately of 0.75 square miles and was founded around the turn of the century by the Yaqui Indians. Today, our population remains predominantly composed of Hispanic, of Mexican-American descent, and Native Americans who are predominantly members of the Pascua Yaqui tribe. The town of Guadalupe has thrived because our partnership with our neighboring communities within Legislative District 27. 27 is Legislative 16, just to clarify that have existed in developing Guadalupe Town Hall, Guadalupe Fire Department, South Mountain Community College in Guadalupe, Guadalupe Boys and Girls Club, Guadalupe Library, Frank Elementary School, Guadalupe Community Development Corporation, Pascua Yaqui Education Center, Pascua Community Service Center, Guadalupe Community Action Program, Guadalupe Senior Center, Maricopa County Office Subdivision or Substation, and Centro de Amistad Behavior Health Center, just to mention a few. We have over 30 businesses and over 5 active churches in our community. Through Guadalupe Housing Department, Pascua Yaqui Tribe Housing Department, Guadalupe Community Development Corporation, and Habitat of Humanity, over 200 new homes have been built through the years for families who are low to very low income. And these programs continue to meet the needs of the community by continuing new construction of homes and rehabilitation of existing homes. The town of Guadalupe has the lowest income population of all municipalities within the Maricopa County, and one of the highest in the state of Arizona, which compares to what exists in the remaining community in Legislative District 27. We, the Town Council of Guadalupe, voted and requested that we stay in Legislative District 27. It is with great importance to us that the Town of Guadalupe stays in Legislative District where a true community of interest exists. We have very little or no community of interest with Legislative District 26. If we are removed from Legislative District 27, we will file objections to the plan that does not include Guadalupe in Legislative District 27. Respectfully, Mayor Alma Yolanda Solares. And just in a lighter note, I just want to thank the commission for your continued hard work, all your members, the time that you give away from your families, from your jobs. I know that this is very difficult, but I just want you to know that every one of us are grateful for everything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christina Campoy from Guadalupe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christina Campoy, C-A-M-P-O-Y, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my community to stay in the district the way it is. I graduated from South Mountain Community College, where I was able to make the dean's list, meaning I made straight A's. First of all, the first community college I went to was Mesa Community College. I didn't feel in touch with that school. South Mountain gave me a more familial feel because I had instructors that were of color and were bilingual. I also was the first one in my family to get a degree from Arizona State University. I, in large part, give thanks and credit to South Mountain Community College because they were the ones that have a satellite school in the community of Guadalupe. And they also help people in the community that have limited transportation to attend community college and better their lives. Not only does South Mountain increase our education, but it has also provided jobs for people in the community of Guadalupe. We don't have any commonality with the city of Scottsdale and Tempe. By tradition, the Guadalupe, the Yaqui people have really migrated west to the Phoenix and Laveen area. With Laveen, what we have in common is they were the farmers, while the town of Guadalupe residents were the crop pickers. We don't have any of that commonality with the city of Tempe, Mesa, Scottsdale. The also thing that was touched upon was the poverty level. Between the years of 2005 and 2009, the per capita income for Guadalupe families was $11,436. I think we all know that Scottsdale people make a lot more income. But I would just like to thank you for the opportunity of hearing us, not because it's a process that you have to take, but I hope that you really listen to the community and its needs and keep us in the district that we are in already. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Frank Lopez from Guadalupe.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I'm a resident of Guadalupe, and I'd like to just echo what my fellow residents just said. But I've been asked, Gino didn't have time to read this second letter, but I've been asked by Gino to read this letter from Catherine Miranda, our District 16 representative. Dear Chairperson Mathis, I'm writing to the Independent Redistricting Commission in the strongest possible opposition to removing the town of Guadalupe from my legislative district. Unfortunately, I am currently out of state on a prior commitment and cannot be there personally to express my view. For 30 years, Guadalupe has been part of the District 16 South Mountain community. We have shared common cultural events and economic growth. Currently, as their state representative, we have begun numerous economic development projects that will be impacted if Guadalupe is removed from my legislative district. The town of Guadalupe, as a community of interest, has bonded and merged with South Phoenix during the past decades into a single community of interest. District 16 legislators have become a strong voice for a community that otherwise would have been neglected and ignored if represented by an East Valley legislative district. The future economic development is at stake in this sudden proposal to place the town of Guadalupe in the East Valley for legislative representation. I currently serve on 2 major national Latino elected official boards, which have also been contacted and have raised concerns on dividing this community of interest with significant historical and cultural ties to South Phoenix. I remain hopeful that the IRC will recognize legitimate redistricting factors which have been expressed in opposing to removing the town of Guadalupe from South Mountain Legislative District. The alternative would be a potential for costly and needless litigation. I respectfully ask that you hear the voices of logic and not divide a community that has remained intact for 30 years. Sincerely, Representative Catherine Miranda, District 16. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joshua Offenhartz, representing SELF from Scottsdale.
Madam Chair, before the next person speaks, I want to encourage the people from Guadalupe to come tomorrow when Bruce Adelson will be here, and he'll explain the reason why we proposed Guadalupe being a different district and the issue of retrogression. So I would encourage you to attend tomorrow's meeting.
Which begins at 4 p.m. for everyone's edification.
Joshua Offenhartz, Offenhartz. First of all, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners, I want to say thank you for letting me speak and holding this meeting. I'm glad to see that cooler heads and compromise seems to be prevailing. It was a tense meeting on Monday for those of us in the audience, and I think that we have made great progress towards a final map, so thank you for that. I'm rising to speak today on proposed legislative District 23, no surprise. After my testimony on Monday afternoon, I went home and looked at the redistricting software to see how best to add 5,000 to 6,000 people from the proposed legislative District 24 into proposed legislative District 23. And what I wanted to testify to today was my recommendation for a number of reasons. The legislative map titled 1212 VRA LD26 version 3 is the only map that seems to have made this change so far. And you take 2 precincts from the eastern edge of Scottsdale, specifically a boundary created by Hayden and McDowell Road, and add that to LD23. While this is a great idea, I would offer an alternative in which you look to add the 5,000 to 6,000 populations from a block in between Scottsdale Road and Hayden Road, as opposed to the proposed Hayden to Pima roads. And the reason that I make this recommendation is that the Coronado High School is actually in that block, and you had removed it from the Scottsdale Unified School District, which had been kept relatively intact. With all due respect, since we're just looking to add non-minority majority voters from the 24 to the 23, I think that it makes sense to pick those voters that would add to compactness and communities of interest, which is why I bring up that regard. Just as some notes for you, in case you haven't delved into the population dynamics, the reason I bring this up is that if you move farther west, there are minority voters, and I realize that we want to keep those in that 24 district as opposed to the 23. I'll finish up with some last thoughts. It's my personal preference for the proposed LD 28, a final draft map that looks something, or a final map that looks something closer to the draft map. But since I've only got 2 minutes, I will come back tomorrow and provide that testimony. Thank you again for listening, and I hope that we can make these changes to 23 to make it an even better district than it already is. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Alberto Gutier from Phoenix. Pete Bankson, representing SELF from Pima.
My My name is Pete Bankson. That's Bengson. I'm one of those people advocating competitive districts, and I know it's the last one on the list, but I just want to remind everybody that the whole purpose of the IRC is to create fair and competitive districts. So I think it's important. Also happy that the only thing I'm paying attention to is competitive districts. You all have 6 different goals to keep in mind, and every time I come, I'm amazed at how complex it is. I've been paying attention to the fact that you guys are running open meetings since I started coming to these sessions in end of June, and then after the state legislature and the governor got involved, I paid even more attention, and I'm really pleased to say that I'm impressed with how all these decisions on the maps are made in open session. Listening to the long, boring discussions of moving a line here or there, I realize it's all being done in the open. And even when there's a little conflict on what we're going to do, it makes it even more clear that it's all done in open session, no backroom stuff. So keep up the good work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn Breyer, representing SELF from Maricopa.
Breyer. First, I want to thank Mr. Sturts for the map that you've presented today. I like the map you did on Monday. I like this one a little bit less, but I appreciate that you were willing to compromise to satisfy, hopefully, some of the people on this commission who really are not that interested in compromise. So thank you very much for that. I also want to thank you and Mr. Freeman for wanting to release the transcripts of the closed meetings. And as a member of the public, makes me wonder why the other 3 are not interested in that, and it makes me suspicious of that process now. Mr. Herrera, I'd like to thank you for being so civil today. I will tell you that I have friends and neighbors who will not come here to speak because you have intimidated them into not wanting to do that, and you have been very civil today, and I appreciate that as well. I have here a letter from a woman in Tucson who has tried countless times to submit a comment through your website. I have had the same experience that she had, which is to say it can't be done half the time. Now my thing is not wanting to work. This is from Nancy McDonald, and her letter reads, "As a resident of Saddlebrook, it is important to me to give you my input and opinion on the matter of putting our community in CD1. That opinion is don't do it. This makes little sense because we are actually much closer to downtown Tucson than we are to the area covered by CD1, and downtown Tucson is in CD2. For many years, Saddlebrook has been actively involved and has had thousands of volunteer hours logged with the children, schools, and families in Oracle, San Manuel, and Mammoth. We have very little in common with the folks in CD1, and we should not be expected to drive so far to be involved with them. Frankly, it just won't happen. Furthermore, how can we expect any representative to cover such a huge and oddly shaped district and represent us properly? All of the constitutional criteria are being met by leaving us in CD2, whereas being assigned to CD1 would not meet constitutional criteria. Why would you be interested in changing our district when so few people find it desirable to make this change? Truly, this seems like a clear case of gerrymandering, and I'm really unhappy about something that seems so dishonest. It is also important for you to know that I did try to send an online form today to www.azredistricting.org/public-input-ASP. Both I and my husband Neil spent considerable time filling out the forms, and when we were done, put in the security codes and hit submit, a new form came up saying our information did not go through, and after going back to try to retrieve what we'd written, our filled out forms were as blank as the new ones. Subsequently, I telephoned 855-733-7478. A woman named Eileen Wilson told me she would note my opinion and put it into a binder. Eileen did tell me there had been a glitch in the computers in their office yesterday, Must be a glitch every day, because that's what I keep hearing too. And she guessed that there was still a problem. I then asked to speak with her supervisor and was connected with someone named Anna Garcia, who announced to me that she was the executive administrative officer, heavy on the officer, for the commission. As I tried to explain my dilemma to her, she continued to interrupt what I was saying. When I told her that it seemed very peculiar that the forms on the website did not work for 2 days and that I wanted more than a notation of my opinion in some binder, she told me it wasn't her fault and that she didn't wish to speak to me because I was very angry, and she hung up on me. I was angry because she continued interrupting everything I said. She needs some training, to say the least. She had offered to give me a fax number, but I do not have a fax machine. Needless to say, as a concerned citizen who had taken the time to try to communicate my wishes in 2 different ways and still didn't feel as if anyone was paying attention, I am not impressed. The way all of this redistricting has been handled is questionable at best. Once more, I'd like to say, do not put the subject communities into CD1. Signed, Nancy McDonald. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Hines, representing Self from Maricopa.
Madam Chair, before we move forward,
Mr. Herrera?
I would recommend that either probably Ms. Gomez contact this individual to see if she clear up any issues she may be having with her website, because I think there's probably a miscommunication. I think it worked perfectly, but I would have Ms. Gomez contact her directly.
Thank you.
So I can speak?
Yes.
All that. Ann Hines, Hines, ANN. Well, I was asked to present information from Flagstaff, Yuma, and Tucson, but I have to respond to the comments today. The 3 Democrats on the IRC talk about competitiveness, but from what I hear, all you talk about is hyper-packing the conservatives to weaken them, while at the same time making sure that every incumbent Democrat is protected. And clearly Herrera's idea yesterday of putting the Republicans out of 8 and into 11 is super hyper-packing. And then I have to respond about the your comments, that the public is very happy and satisfied. So I can say from the East Valley Trib that Maricopa County, our Maricopa County attorney said that there is no public accountability, that it is an immune redistricting commission. Arizona Republic, not certainly known for conservative values, said issues were raised while the commission allegedly hired a Democrat mapping consultant falling behind the scenes lobbying and scheming by Chairwoman Mathis. Capital Times said that behind closed doors, the procurement officials with the State Department of, sorry, I'm speaking fast, of administration stopped working with the commission just before it hired a mapping consultant. We don't know about that. Executive commissions to destroy the initial score sheets from the commissioners behind closed door sessions. So I beg to differ from you, sir. That is what your public, your left-leaning 1960 newspapers are saying. So I salute also the 2 lawyers on the commission, because they have completely ignored the state of California, the taxpayers, and the rest of the commission to protect one person. So now, Madam Chair, will you step up and vote for the maps, or are you going in a nonpartisan independent vote? Or will you continue to be controlled by the 2 people surrounding both sides of you? If you can't vote independent, then why not dissolve this commission and save the taxpayers the money and just go ahead and make your decision for the whole state of Arizona behind closed doors? So, Madam Chair, are you going to be independent, or will you be the Empress Mathis?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Don Ascoli, representing Self from Gila. We have 2 more speakers after that.
Don Ascoli, A-S-C-O-L-I, from Payson, Arizona. Madam Chair, could you put the map for the legislative districts up that you're discussing? I did not have the benefit of getting here early with the snow and all that. Can it be shown? This won't go against my time, will it? Yeah, I apologize. If I asked the young lady in the back if she could do this, but she did not have the software to show me, so this is my first time seeing what is being discussed. Can you expand a little bit on Gila County? Is that possible? Or is that the best you can zoom? Okay. Madam Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for letting me be here. Community of interest has been said, and probably some of you think it's been overused. And I have very much sympathy for the folks in Guadalupe, but good luck with this commission. That's my county, Gila County, 53,000 people, and it's been sliced into 3 districts. 3 districts. It was mentioned earlier by Commissioner Jose Herrera, we won. We won. Have you heard that before? Sounds arrogant to me. It sounds divisive to me. That county has no right to be split. I wear many hats in this county. I live north of Payson. I'm the chairman of the Gila County Planning and Zoning Commission. That's one of the hats I wear. I just came from the meeting. That's why I was late, trying to decide on a little conditional use permit for folks up in East Verde Estates. I've worked my 6 years in that commission, there's 9 of us, to help the community of interest, our county. And you folks have decided to butcher our county. It's the only rural county out of 12 that's split into 3 representatives. Do you know how hard we work to have a connection, to be able to work with our representatives? We have a nice, solid team who represent the rural area of Arizona in LD5. You are going to slice and dice this commission, to this county, into 3 pieces, 15,000 people or so in each section, and you're going to expect them to listen to us little people? You've used our county as political fill. That's how I feel, and I'm going to tell you, if I could have half the county, they'd be down there saying the same thing. I'm very disappointed. Yes, you won, and the people have lost to what you have done. I have back here, you know it, what the district maps look like in 2000, and there was a nice rural district LD5 there. It was 5 counties, almost all whole. And you've chopped it up into 3 or 4 districts. We don't have any representation. You have hurt the rural people of Arizona. I'm upset and mad about it, and I'm not the only one. You don't represent the people, what you've done here. The only way you can solve it is by making us, our community of interest, whole, be compact and contiguous. Don't use us as political fill. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sean England, representing Self from Cave Creek. Yes. Okay. Our next speaker,
Madam
sorry.
Chair. My name is Sean Englund, that's spelled E-N-G-L-U-N-D. Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the Commission, I appreciate everything that you guys have done. I know it's been difficult, and you've put a lot of time into this, and I really appreciate it. What I'm here to discuss today is that I support the IRC approved maps that were approved on October 10th, 2011. I am a former title insurance agent, and I've worked up in the Cave Creek Carefree area for over 15 years. I'm a resident up there. I'm also a licensed realtor in the area, and I'm very familiar with it. And I'm a parent of 2 children that attend the CCUSD schools, and I'm the manager of a large equine breeding facility, and I believe that I truly understand the interests of that area up north. And here's why I support those maps that you've approved. The proposed LD 15 respects both the community of interest and the municipal boundaries while creating a compact and contiguous district. The map also uses the Scottsdale city lines to divide the proposed LD 15 and the LD 23. This respects municipal boundaries for both for all of Scottsdale, Phoenix, and Carefree boundaries, and Carefree. None of these communities are divided on the north part of the proposed district. The parents in this north part of the proposed LD 15 comprise a block of voters that typically support our local public schools in Cave Creek, and this map keeps those parents together, which I believe is very important. The horse industry in this area is a very tight-knit group, and are located in the same county as, or in the same county supervisor district, which is District 3, both north of Carefree Highway and east and west of Cave Creek Road. Keeping them together in this map keeps a community of agricultural interests together. And from a title officer perspective and from a realtor perspective, the homes and subdivisions west of the city of Scottsdale are used as comparable properties, as are the larger non-subdivision homes. This is an important distinction. It's hard to find comparable properties for acreage and custom-built homes, and typically realtors do not use the properties in Scottsdale as comparable to properties in the proposed District 15. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Antonia Campoy, representing Self from Guadalupe.
Good afternoon, Board. Thank you. My name is Antonia Campoy from the community of Guadalupe. I'm going to read our Senator Leah Landrum Taylor's comments. She had to leave, I believe. Strong support for having Town of Guadalupe to be included in the current draft map. Also support from the 48th Street to 24th Street, from McDowell to I-10, taking out and keeping South Mountain Village and Levine whole by adding in from Baseline to Broadway, from 35th Avenue to 59th Avenue, back into the district. Thank you for all your hard work and truly listening to the community. For myself, I'm born and raised a Yaqui member of the Guadalupe community, and I have 6 grandchildren, and I've served both on tribal council and town council. I've attended many town council meetings within the last 3 or 4 years, and I've had the pleasure of having collaborated and met with Leah when she has come out to our town hall on issues of housing and public safety and other issues. So I encourage you to listen to Ms. Leah Taylor and her support for the community of Guadalupe. And I also support Mr. Frank Lopez and all his comments that he gave you a brief history of Guadalupe and everything that we've worked for all these years. So thank you for your time, and hopefully you will not kind of, I teach Yaqui history for South Mountain Community College. I've been working for TD3 for over 30 years. And you can say that I'm involved in the community. So hopefully my coming up here and expressing my concern for we want to stay with South Phoenix. Thank you for your time. Chuculotesia, gracias, thank you.
Thank you very much. That was our last request to speak form. Did I miss anyone? There's somebody? Sure. You'll have to fill out a request to speak form and tell us your name and all of that once you're done.
How are you? Great. My name is Holly Hover. Last name is spelled H-O-V-E-R. Madam Chair and members of the commission, thank you for letting me speak. And in respect of your time, I know we're getting late, I would just like to relay to you that I do wholeheartedly support the legislative map that you approved on October 10th, 2011. It absolutely is the best proposed option for my legislative district. That's District 15. I would like, if I could, just go ahead and submit these thoughts for your review and let everybody get out of here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, public, for your input today. We appreciate it. The time is 4:23 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned, and we'll be meeting again tomorrow at 4 p.m. here. Thanks.